Hello, everybody. My name is Edward Day. This is for Dr. Sweeney's capstone project for winter 2020-2021. So I worked with Sarah Newhouse, who is a digital archivist at here at Drexel. Long story short, this is actually the second part of this capstone. Essentially, what we're looking at here. First of all, let me back up. For those of you who are not familiar with the original work, I was working with Sarah to basically communicate with what's called an API. This API's name is Sandbox. On the Sandbox, anything you can imagine that's ever been archived. This includes any files, videos, anything on there. But this also includes the metadata, digital objects, agent records, anything you can find on a finding aid is also cataloged in here. That said, my tasks for this quarter were to make a plan for unpublishing all digital objects. That was supposed to be at the end of week 5. Writing a script for doing that, which we'll go into here. The second part was to batch update all agent records, and then the third one was simply just to make a customizable report. That was supposed to happen for this quarter. However, I will explain in a minute. Long story short, only managed to get to the first one. So, how did that happen? Well, to explain that, I'm going to. So first of all, what I was trying to do was update all 29,000 digital objects from a single repository. Now, to do that, you first have to log in, authenticate, blah, blah, blah. Again, this is all part of the my first capstone. So anyways, after you use Python to use this URL with, obviously, you would have your username and password here. You log into the client itself. I'll go through, down. Then you're going to start getting digital objects. The thing is, with Python, it can only handle so many at a time. So what this code is doing is it's saying, hey, I need you to get 250 objects at a time. See, there it is. And I want you to get them, blah, blah, blah. You're going to add those digital objects to a list. Go through. Again, I will put the code in the discussion board so you can look at it. Otherwise, we'd be here for like 45 minutes. And then at the end of all of it, once you have that giant list of digital objects, you're going to update that to our URL, or URI in this case, as a JSON data object. And you're going to update that onto the archive space here. As you can see, we'll get to all this a bit later. And then for those of you familiar with Python, we import the client we made, which is this here. And then we say if name and main. So take anything from any global variables that we have over here. For you, those not familiar with Python, basically, if it exists here, I want you to be able to run it here. Anywho's, so we have our client, we're logged in, we're happy, we got our repository, in my case, repository 4, and then a really, really simple code. You're thinking, well, that seems not too bad, right? Yeah, because I wrote most of this code from last quarter. So it should be a breeze. I really only wrote like from here down this quarter and then this chunk right here. You're thinking, well, that should only take you a couple of weeks. Well, problem is, learning how to do this was no walk in the park. Last quarter, I learned through Postman how to do these things called get commands. As you can see here, let me just Control F and we'll get. So it's get. These are all get commands. So it's like, give me this information, give me that information. Okay. However, this quarter we were doing post commands, which you'll notice there's only one of them. What post does on an API is say, hey, all this stuff that I got, in our case, we're changing the value of publish from true to false, storing that in this variable x, and then taking all the data from x and running from our function here. And we're saying to our URL, or in this case a URI, hey, all that information, post it now to that address. So where were the problems then? So that seems pretty straightforward. Well, first when I ran this code, we got it set up and running by week 5. And I started testing it because I had everything written, I had everything functioning, and it was saying it was working. However, when I would go here, instead of saying none, let me get the proper thing here. Select repository, boom, boom. Let me move this. Instead of saying browse digital objects, scroll down. This saying false 29,700 and whatever, it said true. So obviously, for some reason, my code wasn't working properly. It kept saying after about 45 minutes or so, hey, this last statement, it's done, we did it, hooray. But obviously, if all things are still there, it's not working. So Sarah and I had to back up, had to take some reapproaches to this. We're like, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? So I actually ended up altering this code 20, 30 times. And then eventually it just wasn't coming through. Now it's like end of week 5, end of week 6. So eventually we ended up figuring out, I looked at some documentation, watched some videos, figured out some stuff, and I figured out that it must be what's known as the backend. So basically what the backend is where the API exposes itself and you can run things like post commands or things. And basically my code was knocking on the door like, hey, are you there? Who's there? I'm sending you a request, but nobody was actually home. So what we ended up doing was we had to contact Atlas, which are the third-party company that runs the site, and had to be like, hey, check out my code. Why isn't this working? And they said, yeah, actually, you're right. It should just be digital object square bracket URI, and that'll solve your problem. So for anyone thinking about getting into coding, you can literally bash your head against the desk for weeks trying to figure out a problem, only to figure out there was literally a 3-letter string that solves the whole thing. That said, the next time I ran this, it ran for 4 hours and 45 minutes. But not surprising, X actually updates these things one item at a time. So anyways, eventually we got here. Let me bring this back over again. And we got our false 29,741. Yes, we did it. We got there. We were successful. But then there's still these 250 that are true. And unfortunately, now that we're in week 9, we ran the script successfully, and like I said, from our client here, we get them 250 at a time. And if you go to my week 1 presentation, you'll learn that this code basically says, hey, just keep grabbing objects, even if it's less than 250, so like 87, 32, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, until you have 0. So I'm not really sure why, but again, that's where this guide comes in. So the last thing I did for the archives, this is actually part of week 1, so let me scroll down a little bit here. Here we go. I gave him a full breakdown, like here's how to run the script, here's how to debug the script. When you get an error, this is how you can debug it, this is how you can run with it. Remember, if you remember to have all your files in the right thing, like I was talking about earlier, the if main and name, blah blah blah. And then I wrote, and then this is where I wrote kind of like a, hey, this is what we were doing. These are the problems we ran into. Kind of setting it up for the next student. So while I didn't get to do necessarily everything, Sarah and I agreed that like, hey, this was a tremendous amount of work. I definitely put in, oh my gosh, over between the 2 quarters, 10 hours a week. I definitely did way more than that. This is probably 300 more hours between the 2 quarters that I put into this. Like not even a question. But I think what we learned about this was just the process itself. Like, first of all, one of the second projects I had, which was to batch update all the agent files, like I mentioned, that was passed on to another another person, and the third problem of making a customizable report literally just ran out of time. So from all this, what I've basically learned is like problems evolve. Like they get harder, they get stronger, whatever you want to call it. And it's okay to like reach out, like I did reach out to like the creators of this thing to find the answer. And sometimes that's what you have to do. You have to know who your network is. You have to pool your resources, and you have to do what you need to do and take even the smaller victories. I mean, like 29,000 is no small feat for my program to run, So at the end of the day, these past 2 quarters I've felt like I've been barely floating, barely living, barely surviving. I reached out back in August with a message that basically said, "Hey, I know Python." Kind of like, I had a couple classes under my belt, but then I jumped into it and we started working, and things, like I said, they evolved, they mutated. I didn't know anything about APIs, but I had to jump into it. And I gotta say, it's a very wonderful experience, very challenging experience, but worthwhile nonetheless. Anyways, in a nutshell, working with APIs, just to wrap up here, just to cover all the objectives. Working with APIs, learning the get commands, learning the post commands, learning how to communicate, learning that my Python has limits, honestly learning a bit more about Python in general, with creating functions and classes and things like that. Knowing the difference between URLs, URIs, JSON, working with JSON. Just that's in a nutshell, but that's all the stuff I've been really working with overall these past 2 quarters. It has been crazy, phenomenal experience, like I said. If you have any questions at all about any of the projects, you can find, I'll put the link for this YouTube video, obviously, in the discussion board, and then you can find the link to the other discussion. I will have the guide up. I will have client and main up in case any of you guys are coders and want to look at it for yourselves. But if there's any other questions or whatever on the project, just let me know. Again, very, very tall order. If I could go into it again, I would definitely want to have the experience I do now with APIs already instilled before jumping head first. Again, any questions, just let me know. Otherwise, yeah, it's been fun. All right, have a good one.